Several years ago, I was a mom with a nervous system in overdrive. This didn't just affect me physically, it affected everyone in my home and around me. I thought I needed hours of therapy, expensive supplements, or a whole house overhaul to get myself out of this state of overwhelm. But it turns out the most effective way to get out of fight or flight mode was by building simple, Christ centered micro habits that didn't cost me anything and took me less than 10 minutes a day. The first habit is extremely simple but has a huge impact. I drastically reduced the music that stimulated a strong emotional response and started intentionally listening to chant and classical music every day. Most modern music is set to beats that are intentionally rousing some type of emotion: false nostalgia, rebellion, lust, or even just a sense of isolation. Many of us don't realize that we're listening to things that put our emotions on a roller coaster and overstimulate our tired nervous systems. Classical music, on the other hand, engages an entirely different part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex. This encourages calm and reason instead of emotional reaction. If you're in a state of fight or flight mode, your body often ignores logic. That's why you can't just tell yourself to be calm. Your judgments become emotional reactions. Listening to music that stimulated my prefrontal cortex was very calming and helped me focus on what I was doing. One less stress on my nervous system. And a big bonus, it helped calm down my little kids as well. Gregorian chant goes a step further. It puts your mind in a receptive state. That's why it's used during religious liturgy. Brain scans have actually shown that the prefrontal cortex lights up, and the part of your mind that is receptive to spiritual inspiration is also very active when listening to this type of music. Now, I know that music can be a touchy subject. Next to smells, music is the most powerful way to bring up associations in the memory. And a lot of the music we love is tied to times when we felt younger or more carefree. But I found some of those songs also brought up thoughts that isolated me from God. They just didn't bring me into the present moment where I needed to be, aware of what I was doing and open to God's quiet inspirations throughout the day. Before the Israelites even knew God's holy name, they called him simply I am. God lives in the eternal present, and we do best when we stay there with him as much as possible in this life. When we dwell too much on the past, we slip into depression. When we live too much in the future, anxiety can take hold. Listening to more modern music, I felt like I was being force fed emotions instead of allowing them to arise naturally from real life events. Now, I'm not saying that all I listen to now is classical and chant, but integrating them into my day and removing emotionally stimulating music has made a big difference in being able to be calm and present throughout my day. The second thing I cut out is something that most moms consider a must, but I actually think it's one of the biggest reasons we feel overstimulated. And if we haven't met yet, I'm Andrea, a Catholic wife and mom of eight. And if you're a mom like me, you probably think multitasking is the only way to keep your head above water. But what if I told you that multitasking might actually be stressing your brain out and keeping your nervous system dysregulated? Everyone has to juggle a few plates at a time, especially mothers. But nowadays, multitasking has gotten out of control. We don't just sit and watch a movie. We watch a movie, scroll our phones, and answer text in a group chat. And I think we all know the main culprit enabling this multitasking disease: the smartphone. When I started stepping back and looking at my day, I was amazed at how little I was doing just one thing at a time. I couldn't just eat. I had to eat and write out a grocery list or scroll my phone. I couldn't just make dinner. I had to follow a recipe, listen to a podcast, and answer my children's questions all at once. And the worst thing was, I noticed that the moments I sinned by impatience toward my children were usually the times I was multitasking. I'd be staring at my phone, answering messages, shopping online, and being put on hold all at once. And then my toddler would come up crying, and it's no wonder I would lose it. I was overloaded. Now, I try not to put on a podcast unless the children are occupied and I have time to actually listen and digest. I make sure there are quiet, well, mostly quiet, times during the day where I can process what I've seen and heard. Those are the moments when I can lift my heart up to God and check in with myself about how my day is going and what I could be doing better. The reason we multitask is because we feel like there isn't enough time. But really, that's a lack of trust, a fear that God hasn't given us enough time to do what truly needs to be done. That constant hurry keeps us trapped in stress and often leaves us less productive when all is said and done. I've had to change my whole attitude about my days to slow down, do one thing at a time, and stop measuring success by how much I got done. Instead, I try to measure it by how much love I poured into what I'm doing. Because, as St. Paul says in Corinthians, if I'm extremely productive but don't have charity, I'm just a sounding brass or a tinkling cymbal. In the end, God won't judge us by how many tasks we completed, but by how much love we put into them. And when we rush, when we hurry, we lose our peace. And it's in that peace that we're able to redirect our intentions toward God. If that constant state of hurry and overwhelm has been stealing your peace, I want to invite you to take a real step toward change. I created a free 7-day reset for Christian mothers, the same simple steps I use to begin healing my mind, body, and soul with Christ at the center. You'll find the link down below. It's completely free. And from the mothers who've contacted me, I know it's been a big game changer. The next thing I did was reframe and stop playing the blame game. So many times throughout the day, something goes wrong. Things don't go how we planned, and our first instinct is to look for someone or something to blame. A dish breaks, and we find ourselves yelling, "If only you hadn't done this, that wouldn't have happened." I realized I did this more often than I thought. I think one of the biggest reasons that we like to blame is because it gives us this false sense of control, as if by controlling that person or situation, we could have avoided the problem altogether. But over time, I learned to change my attitude to align with the truth that God is in complete control of every single moment of our day, even the small, inconvenient ones. And if he allows something unpleasant, he has a greater good in mind. It's the absolute best thing that could be happening in that moment. Now, when I start slipping into blame mode, I stop and replace or reframe that thought with the truth that God allowed this for my sanctification. Sometimes I even see later why he allowed it. Once I was stuck behind a very slow car when I was already late. I was tempted to get angry and complain, but a few minutes later, I came upon a fresh accident. If I hadn't been behind that slow car, I probably would have been involved in that accident and maybe not be making this video today. And I just want to say, sometimes we blame our children when something goes wrong at home. I'm not saying we shouldn't correct bad behavior so that these things don't happen again, but sitting and ranting about inconveniences, especially over things they didn't really mean to do, doesn't promote love or peace in your home. The next habit was the most fundamental in recovering from nervous system dysfunction, and that was making time alone with God. I started with just 10 minutes. I would read a few verses of scripture or a spiritual book, then sit and talk to God. And more importantly, listen for Him to talk to me. Those few minutes made a world of difference in my mindset for the day. If I miss my morning meditation for a day or two, I really start to notice. I get more irritable, things bother me more, and I forget to turn to God throughout the day. Now, I know a lot of moms struggle to find quiet moments, so I have two tips. First, get this time with God first thing in the morning if possible, before your mind is flooded with the day's activities. You may have to wake up a little earlier, but have that book ready next to your bed or where you like to drink your morning beverage. Second, pray to God to help you find the time. He really wants this time with you. And I found that when I give it to Him, He somehow gives me more time during the day. This time with God always gives me perspective and calms me in a way that nothing else can. There's another type of time with God that is extremely crucial for our peace, and that is our time with God on Sunday. We often think that God's rules are arbitrary, but He actually designed our body, soul, and mind to function best when we follow them. And this is very true of resting on Sundays. Back in the 1920s in Soviet Russia, Lenin tried to implement a 5-day work week and then a 6-day one, essentially getting rid of weekends and making it harder for people to worship on Sundays. The experiment was a total disaster. People were discontent, the productivity dropped, and everyone was exhausted. Eventually, the Soviet Union went back to the 7-day week. One of the biggest things that has restored my peace and calm has been reclaiming the Sunday as a true day of rest and time with God. Now, I've always gone to Mass every Sunday, but there were little things that I needed to stop. I stopped online browsing, stayed off social media, and whenever possible, spent that time listening to sermons or doing spiritual reading. So many people use Sundays to catch up on chores, shopping, or cleaning, but God commanded rest for a reason. Observing Sunday isn't just pleasing to God, it's something our mind and body desperately need. We need a day to stop thinking about the things of the world and lift our minds to God. Now, I know this next one's going to make some of you a little bit angry, and believe me, it didn't make me happy when I first tried it, but I started being intentional with my caffeine intake and noticed some really great results. Now, before you come at me with the pitchforks, I'm not against coffee, but when I was in high school and college, I could not stop drinking caffeine. I drink 6 or 7 cups a day, even in the evenings, and then wonder why I couldn't sleep or my heart was racing. I got better about it after my first pregnancy, but one habit stayed: drinking coffee first thing in the morning on an empty stomach. When you wake up, your body already releases cortisol because you haven't eaten in over 8 hours. Adding caffeine on top of that ramps up the cortisol even more. I noticed that when I drank coffee on an empty stomach, I'd start rushing around and snapping at people. If I drank too much, I could feel my heart racing and my anxiety rising. Now I drink half calf coffee and make sure not to drink it on an empty stomach or overdo it. This small change helps me stay calmer and less anxious. I'm not saying to give up caffeine completely, but it's definitely something to be mindful of if you want to stay peaceful and avoid overload. All of these small changes, from what I listened to how I worked to how I rested, reminded me that peace does not have to be complicated or expensive. You don't need hours of therapy or complicated homemaking routines to help reset your nervous system. You just need a few simple habits that bring your body and soul back under God's design so you can start living the way He created us to live. That's why I created my free 7-day reset, made especially for Christian mothers who want to trade hurry, anxiety, and physical depletion for peace and clarity in Christ. Thank you so much for listening today. I will see you next week. God bless you.